And is this something that I can enjoy with my kid? Like it really is important to me that I can do those kinds of things, or at least know better than to take them to the movie with me. Because take, for example, like um, Deadpool and Wolverine. I've seen the previous Deadpool movies, and I was asked, "Can we go see it?" No, no, you cannot. Absolutely not. We will watch that together when you are 17. Hello and welcome to the Cup of Tea Critiques podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Chasen, and like always, I'll be joined today by the great team that brings you cupofteacritiques.com. We are excited to get started on our podcast where we will share our perspectives on several areas in movies and television. At Cup of Tea Critiques, we review movie and television series and tag them with a tea brew that evokes a feel for the production. In this way, you can decide for yourself if they're your cup of tea. Here on the Cup of Tea Critiques podcast, we will dive even deeper into the productions and topics we broach on our website, engaging in conversation and sharing our unique perspectives. Ready for a deep look with a deep brew? This week's topic, part 1 of a 2-part series on the history and impact of the movie rating system. And Mom, you actually wrote this new article that you can find on the Cup of Tea Critiques website at cupofteacritiques.com. And this is in our Crumpets area. Mom, you're talking about the rating system. Can you tell us what inspired you to start this article and give us a bit of the history of the rating system as well?
Sure. What we now know as the Motion Picture Association, or MPA, was established in 1922 to ensure the financial stability of the film sector. And to do that, the association sought out the support of Wall Street institutions. By 1930, which is just 8 years later, the MPA's mission shifted, though, from ensuring the industry's stability to resolving to maintain what it called a clean moral tone across the industry. So William H. Hayes, a former politician and head of the Republican National Committee, was installed as head of the then MPA to lead this cause. And he was installed, by the way, by politicians, clergy, and others who were concerned about, the moral tone of films. Now, Hayes developed something called the Hayes Code, or what has also become known as the Production Code. So think of the Production Code as Hollywood's first rating system. It had 2 tiers. It was a 2-tiered rating system, and the film was either accepted or denied. It was that simple, 2 tiers. To add a little context, though, religious clergy and politicians were becoming increasingly concerned about nudity and what it considered as morally gray matter in movies. So examples of some of these movies, or what are known as pre-coded films, pre-production code films, are The Divorcee, which is a 1930 film about a woman responding to her husband's cheating on her by doing some cheating of her own.
Heart was breaking like mine, but instead you tell me your man's pride can't stand the gas.
Now, wait a minute, Jerry, listen.
Oh, I don't want to listen. I'm glad I've discovered there's more than one man in the world while I'm young and they want me. Believe me, I'm not missing anything from now on.
Another was The Public Enemy, which is a 1931 film starring James Cagney and Jean Harlow. And it is about a guy trying to, make it big in organized crime. So there's some bootlegging, there's some smoking, there's some drinking, and there's some violence. And then there's Red-Headed Woman, a 1932 film where Jean Harlow plays a secretary attempting to lure her boss away from his wife.
Give me that key. Give me that key.
Oh, you're afraid. You're afraid of yourself because you know you love me.
Oh, am I?
Now, you're afraid you're going to take me in your arms. You're afraid you're going to kiss me.
Is that so?
Well, why don't you do it?
Keep away from me, I'm warning you.
Why don't you do it?
Keep away from me.
You don't dare stay here. You don't trust yourself. Oh, do it
again. I like it. Do it again.
So sexuality, or more specifically, women's sexuality, along with alcohol, smoking, language, violence, were all concerning for politicians, clergy, and other influential people who seemed to consider themselves to be guardians of morality, found these exhibitions in film problematic. So enter William Hayes's production code, which is effectively Hollywood's first rating system. It's important to point out that the then MPA was not the only organization that rated films. The National Legion of Decency, which consisted of religious clergy, mostly of Catholic denomination, but not solely. It consisted of clergy from other Protestant denominations as well. They also rated films. Movies were given an A for morally unobjectionable, B for morally objectionable, and C for condemned. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho was given a B rating from the National League of Decency. This environment in film continued through the late 1960s, and if you can try to put yourself in that era as a filmmaker in Hollywood, you can feel just how oppressive the environment was and just how it suppressed the creative freedom at that time.
Yeah, and as I was reading this article, I found myself jotting down some notes because I felt like when this was first initiated, the idea was, and there seemed to be this conflict with the filmmakers as well, how we can have this idea of freedom of speech, but it was only influenced by those that were in power. So it was more an idea that only allowed voices that they wanted to feature most. It seems like it went from an extremely restrictive idea to the filmmakers wanting to make sure that their ability to create influence changes in ratings. What other influencing factors do you think played a role in that evolution?
Two things I want to emphasize here. One is that there is a political component to the rating system. As I pointed out, Hayes from the very beginning came from the political sector. He was actually head of the Republican National Committee. He came from that, and he was a politician himself. So he came from that background. And so that suggests to me that there was some push from the political sector to go do something about this film industry. We don't like the content at all. The other side of this is, remember, the National Legion of Decency is actually religious-based. It consisted of clergy members, mainly from the Catholic denomination, but there were also members from other Protestant denominations as well. And so you have this, essentially you have morality being rated or legislated here from the political side and from the religious side, and they're deciding what is okay morally. And so that I think it's important to understand that is what's undergirding the rating system. What I think put an awful lot of pressure on changing this were a couple of things. I think one, viewers began to say, I don't know, I don't see things that way. So I think that was part of it. The other thing putting pressure on them is we have the courts now ruling that what the rating system was essentially doing, what the Hayes Code, which was enforceable by law, was doing was censoring. And so those cases, those rulings really helped put pressure on the MPA to say, okay, you got to find another way. You got to do things differently here. And so when Jack Valenti came along, he heard that and essentially transformed the MPA rating system. And so Jack Valenti came along in 1968 and took over the Motion Picture Association rating system. Rather than the goal of setting a moral tone now, the MPA's new mission under Valenti was to determine the appropriateness of a film for children. In essence, it was to help parents decide if a film was right for their children. And he developed what we now see as a gradient rating. It began with 4 ratings: G for general audience, M for mature, R for restricted, which meant you had to be 16 years old to get into the film, and X for pornographic, where you typically had to be 18 years old to get into that film. In 1984, M was split into PG and PG-13. And R was changed from having to be 16 years old to get into the film to 17 years old to get into the film. In 1990, the X rating was changed to NC-17, meaning you had to be at least 18 years old to get into an NC-17 film.
When Chris and I were talking, I was surprised. Surprised isn't the right word, but it was enlightening, eye-opening to realize that I've been alive as this process has transitioned. You know,
Yeah.
I was born, then we got PG and PG-13, and I didn't even realize that, you know, in 1990 is when NC-17 actually came about. So I've been alive to see the creation of a few of these levels. What's next? You know, where does it evolve from here? Does it expand more? Do we get more splicing? Are we going to condense any of these? Or is it going to go away altogether, given that, you know, now we're digital and everything is at home, everybody can make up their own designs.
The beginning of the PG-13 rating was in 1984. It was called, the first film was called Red Dawn, and I think I talked with you about this a few months ago, that in part it became up because of parental concerns about violence in PG movies, particularly the new Indiana Jones, which was written by George Lucas while he was going through a divorce. So it was like a darker movie than what people were used to seeing from him. And so that and Gremlins facilitated the the debut of the PG-13 rating.
The other thing I wanted to touch on a bit was the R rating changed by 1 year. You know, the R rating went from 16 to 17. I'm thinking, okay, so what's magical about that 1 year? You know, what magically changes in an individual between 16 and 17?
Yeah. Nothing.
So
I feel like it was
didn't think
another layer. I think it was another layer of control that they wanted to add, because at 16 kids can drive, at 18 they turn into full-blown adults. So I felt like pushing it back to 17 was just a control component. I don't think there's really a difference between a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old's understanding of the world. I really don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. While the environment was improved over the production code, this environment under the ratings environment under Valenti was definitely improved over the production code, because now you have this gradient rating system as opposed to just this binary system of accept, deny. It was far from satisfactory. Well, still far from satisfactory as far as filmmakers were concerned. You know, under Valenti's tenure, when they could not get feedback on how they could change their films to improve their ratings. Now, this is important to filmmakers because the less restrictive the rating, the bigger the audience they could garner for their films. So a film's rating has consequences for its revenues. Under Valenti's tenure, there was significant tension between the MPA and independent filmmakers. Filmmakers with major studios, however, were given all the notes they needed to make changes if they were inclined to do so. And so we can fill in some of the gaps here in my overview, you know, as we go along. And I apologize for being so long-winded, but I think that does a decent job of laying the groundwork for our talk today.
Yeah, and it's through that transformation of the system that it went from being what, as they said, more of a censorship kind of deal. It evolved into more, it seemed more like informative, and the intent of the rating system as a whole went a bit different. What my question is, I'm going to throw this now to Dad and Chris. It seems like this was more transitioned from a censorship situation to informing the audience of what they're about to take in. Have you guys found yourselves at all influenced by the ratings of movies? If does it influence your decision on wanting to go or not go see a film?
I am an adult in my 30s with no children. So when I see movies or really any entertainment, my first thought is purely of whether I would enjoy it or not. So so sometimes it's weighing different factors. It's like I don't have an example off the top of my head, but I enjoy a good R-rated movie, and sometimes it depends on the topic of the movie where I go, well, if this movie premise is based on something where I feel like it would be better if it's R-rated, but it's not R-rated, I might go, well, I don't know if this movie is really going to be as engaging as I think it should be. And then there's other movies where if it's a fun action adventure type of movie, which we don't see quite as much anymore. The action adventure, like, The Mummy, for example.
I will give you £100 to save this man's life.
Madame, I would pay £100 just to see him hang.
£200.
Proceed.
£300.
Any last requests, pig?
Yeah, loosen the knot and let me go.
Yeah, man. Of course we don't let him go. Yalla, bada!
£500.
Walk off, Andak. And what else? I'm a very lonely man.
There aren't quite as many movies like that, but that feels like a good PG-13 movie. And if you see it R-rated, it's like, well, all right, maybe this one goes a little darker or more grim than what I actually want to see. So I think it's multi-layered, but it's kind of the rating compared with whatever the premise of the movie is.
It's interesting because I look at a rating when it comes to whether or not I want to see a movie. I look at it through two different lenses. One is if it's something that I want to go see. I'm sort of in line with what Chris says. If it's a R-rated movie, I think it will probably have the type of content that I'm looking for. But when I see a movie that's something that's more geared towards children, I think about whether or not it's something that I will take my granddaughter to see or to share with her. So I look at it in those two different ways, depending on what the movie is about.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, Dad. It's funny. The question I just asked, I was actually asked of myself, and it is a parallel feeling for me. I'm simultaneously trying to decide, is this a movie that I want to watch? And the rating does influence the type of film I'm expecting to see. And so I'm simultaneously thinking about this for myself. And is this something that I can enjoy with my kid? Like it really is important to me that I can do those kinds of things, or at least know better than to take them to the movie with me. Because take, for example, like Deadpool and Wolverine. I've seen the previous Deadpool movies, and I was asked, "Can we go see it?" No, you cannot. Absolutely not. We will watch that together when you are 17. Like, that's just not happening, because I understood the content in that movie. But at the same time, I was like really eager to go see it myself because I knew what type of experience I was going to have. And I know that this was something they were thinking about as they were creating the movie. Can we create a rated R movie, given now that this particular production had switched hands into Disney, and so they were wondering if it needed to fall under the PG-13 directive, it seems like, it comes from that studio. But ultimately it did not. It went and stuck with the rated R rating, and I'm glad, because I got the movie I wanted to see, language and all, violence and all. I'm glad, though, that they slapped that rating on there instead of something else that made me think it would have been acceptable, and it turned out it wasn't, and oh my goodness, now my kid's seeing something wrong. So
yeah,
it definitely plays for both ways. Go ahead, Chris.
I still don't have a specific movie like you did, but I like mob movies. I'm a big fan of mobster movies. A PG-13 mob movie probably isn't gonna do it for me. If you got gangsters calling each other jerks and sons of biscuit eaters, I don't. It's just not going to come across as very authentic to me. So I need to, if I'm going to see a mob movie, I need to know that they're going to be using all the language mobsters probably use, and doing all the things, and not giving a stern talking to somebody who ratted on them. Like it's I had to be seeing the actual experience of a mob movie. So,
Mom, how about yourself? Have you found yourself influenced, or as your movie going experience has evolved over time, has the rating even played a role on whether or not you want to take something in?
No, not really. I cared a lot about ratings when I was a kid because it dictated whether or not I could see the movie. And back then, as I said in the article, they carded you back then. They didn't play. They carded you back then, and that's not the case today. But today, the ratings are not a big deal to me. I do notice that if it's PG-13, it's, I tend to prejudge the movie as flat. It's probably not going to appeal to me very much. I'm probably not going to enjoy it very much. That's not always the case, though. But yeah, I don't pay that much attention to them anymore. I tell you what I do pay attention to is the length of the film. I'm not going to pay my money to see an 1.5-hour movie. I want a movie.
I'm with you there. That could be a whole separate topic, and we might have even approached it on some other ones, but I'm in agreement with you. If it's an 1.5 hours, I'll catch it when it's released on digital. But
it goes both ways, though. Because I think some people saw the runtime of like Killers of the Flower Moon and were like, damn.
Fair point.
Yeah.
But Mom, you've talked about the evolution in the way the rating systems work, which also we talked about a little bit of the influencing factors. So the original rating system was a little bit more geared towards censorship. It seemed to have evolved now towards the type of audience that is allowed to watch it, and it's kind of a permission structure for parents as to if they'll allow their children to go ahead and see it. Now, the film industry, the way this process worked, they will get that rating before the movie is released, and then they're given an opportunity to make whatever changes so that it can fall under the category that they want. Most of them wanting to be PG-13 so that it can appeal to a wider audience and make the most money. My question is, what are your thoughts on editing a film to fit certain ratings?
I don't have a problem with them doing that at all. I think the filmmaker has to be realistic about the business that they're in. One, they are creators, of course, and they want their film to be an expression of their ideas. And they should be given that opportunity to do so. However, film is a business. If their film doesn't sell, they won't be in that business for very long. And so they need to balance those two priorities. And, sometimes they are competing priorities. And if their film doesn't get the rating they need in order for the film to make money, well, okay, guess what? I think you may be forced to make concessions if you want to stay in this business long. So they have to make a decision. Do you want to recut that film so that you can get it to an R or get it to a PG-13, whatever your goal rating is? That's up to you. They have a decision to make. I have no problems at all with them exercising that option.
And I think it's worth it to add, movies have reshoots and re-edits pretty routinely anyway for other reasons. Sometimes they get focus grouped and they find out people don't like the ending and they'll reshoot the ending entirely. So I think that when DVDs came along, we kind of got more of a glimpse into this, that they have director's cuts, they have and director commentary. Sometimes they'll give you some insight into how they change things on the fly or after the fact. And we saw in DVD features pretty routinely there would be alternate endings. I remember for Joyride, there were like it's a horror movie in the early 2000s. There were like 4 different endings for it on the DVD. So it's not like it's introducing something filmmakers aren't routinely doing anyway. They're just doing it for a little bit of a different reason.
Yeah. Along those lines, the thing that struck me most about that was a bit of the unfairness in terms of that. And independent filmmakers didn't seem to get much feedback when it came to the things that were considered objectionable to the MPA, whereas those that were associated with the larger studios got detailed information as to what the objections were in terms of getting to the rating that they wanted to get to. So I thought the the dynamic going on there was interesting and unfair, obviously, to the independent filmmakers.
So, yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. And that was under Valenti. The system was definitely unfair. What Terry is referring to is if you were a part of a larger studio, keep in mind that the Motion Picture Association is a member association, and larger studios are members of that association. They pay a lot of money to be members of that association. So what do you get? What benefits do you get being a member of an association, especially an association like that? There are some benefits to being inside already and being connected to decision makers. Not to mention your studio is very wealthy. Warner Brothers has tons of money, right? Sony has tons of money. So if you are making a film as a part of Sony, so you're going to get your R. It's very little. The feedback won't matter. You're going to get your R. Or if it's too risque, you get some feedback. You're going to get tons of feedback that's going to allow you to get the R you want. Well, if you're a mini filmmaker, if you're a little filmmaker, an independent filmmaker, where you're working on a tight budget and you submit it and they give you an NC-17, where are you going to get the money to recut your film so that you can get your NC-17 to an R? So that's, to your point, that is just inherently unfair. And that is a huge source of tension between filmmakers and the MPA. Fortunately, though, things have changed under Charles Rivkin, who since 2016 has been head of the MPA. And he now provides feedback to even independent filmmakers on what they need to do with their films in order to move their rating where they would like it to be moved. So things have changed in that regard.
And that'll wrap up part 1 on today's topic. Be sure to tune in next week for part 2 as we continue our discussion of the movie rating system as it stands today. As always, we thank you so much for listening and figuring out your cup of tea along with us. You can see we can go on, but we look forward to you joining us again next week as we continue our discussion. Be sure to rate and follow the podcast and leave a comment on any topics you'd like to hear us discuss. You can stay in the loop on all things COTC by subscribing on our website at cupofteacritiques.com. You can also find us on Facebook, check out our Instagram at Cup of Tea Critiques, and on Letterboxd at COT Critiques. For Reba, Terry, and Chris, I'm Brandon. We'll see you next week for another deep look with a deep brew.